I'm going to say something here that some people will disagree with, and that's fine. But if you've built a company or you're trying to build one, I want you to really think about this next thing that I'm going to say before you just dismiss it. Leaders don't have dozens of primary responsibilities. They ultimately have two. And if either one of these is neglected, the effects don't stay isolated. They move through the company in ways that are easy to overlook, especially early on, and difficult to repair later on. Hi, I'm James, and welcome back to the Leadership in 5 podcast. And today we're talking about two responsibilities that leaders have. The first responsibility that I want to talk with you about is hiring with excellence. Now, this is not about filling open positions. It's about protecting the future of the company, one hiring decision at a time. Every person who joins the organization becomes part of the standard that everyone else gets to experience. Their work ethic, their judgment, their willingness to take ownership, and the way that they treat others all become part of the daily environment that your team works inside of. When hiring is done carefully, or maybe when hiring is done well, that standard that we're talking about, it strengthens. However, if hiring is rushed or treated like a short-term solution to some sort of pressure release, then that standard is going to weaken. People notice the difference in how work gets done and in how expectations get handled. And don't miss this. Hiring decisions, they're never neutral. They always move the company in one direction or another. And that takes us to responsibility 1A, which sits right beside it. And it can't be separated from the first responsibility. Build and protect culture. Most leaders understand the idea of building culture, but far fewer understand what it means to actually protect it. So culture is protected in moments when behavior falls short of the standard and the leader decides whether to address it or to ignore it. And leaders who take this responsibility seriously address issues immediately, because any kind of delay, it creates uncertainty about what's acceptable here. I was just talking with a client recently who had given an employee pretty direct feedback about their performance. The employee didn't argue. They didn't get defensive. They acknowledged, yeah, there was an issue there. But a response like that creates a little bit of a risk for the leader, because it can be tempting to just assume improvement will follow simply because the feedback was accepted and the person said, yeah, that seems fair. It might feel like the conversation went well, and that alone can create a sense of closure. But I've seen this before, and the reality is that nothing has yet changed. The employee accepts the feedback. It's the leader's job to set the tone for how improvement will happen going forward. This occurs through being specific about what will be done differently next time. What action will replace the behavior that caused the problem that we're talking about? And see, without that step, well, the conversation ends with agreement, but there's no real follow-through, no real accountability. And it just simply leaves things to chance. Now, I think that most people know that correction should typically happen in private, because that's how you preserve dignity. People grow when they're respected, even while they're being corrected. You do that in private. When leaders step into those moments, they're not simply managing behavior. They're honoring a promise to the rest of the team. And this is so important. See, the people that are doing the right thing every day, they're watching your decisions closely. They're deciding whether the standard actually does mean something here, or whether it shifts depending on the circumstances. This is why culture cannot be communicated by having some smart-sounding statements on posters. You already know this, but the ideal way for your business to run is built and protected by standards that are lived and reinforced and corrected. Because when these two responsibilities that we're talking about today, when they're taken seriously, good changes begin to show up inside your company. And they usually appear before anyone can really point to a single metric. You start noticing that people want to stay, not because they're being convinced to stay, but because the environment makes sense to them. Stability begins to form. And as that stability it takes hold, the nature of the work starts to change. Instead of spending time correcting the same types of issues over and over, well, leaders and managers are finding themselves actually spending time developing people. And the best part, well, development becomes possible because the leaders are no longer buried in preventable problems. Take note of this. None of these things happen by accident. They are the natural result of hiring well and then defending the standard once people are inside the company. Now, one thing I help every one of my clients do is to operate with excellence. This is execution at its finest, and it becomes the very backbone for your culture to attach to. And that works because that's when the real standards become clear expectations instead of these abstract ideas. The attention shifts toward building momentum instead of always recovering from repeated setbacks. See, these two responsibilities, hiring with excellence and building and protecting culture, they're not extra work added on top of leadership. They are the work, and it makes everything else possible. And that right there, that is a major step in leaving it better.